We are the Motor City. And with that, nothing documents the history of the automotive industry like the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. Joining us now on the show, let's bring in Cynthia Jones. She's the general manager. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
It really is not only a national historic landmark, but one of the biggest gems that we have here in Metro Detroit. But how has the museum been doing in the middle of the pandemic?
So we've been back open since July of last year, and we just keep slowly growing back. So we really think about it as revitalizing our teams, revitalizing the experience for folks, but always putting safety first. So safety for our teams, safety for our volunteers, safety for our guests. And things are going slower than I'd like, because I love to have folks visiting us. But I think that is good because people have been taking it safe with us.
So, with that, Cynthia, I wonder too, like throughout this time, have you been able to go and kind of dig through the closets? Because we know a lot of museums have so much more than what's on display. Have you been able to get behind the doors and kind of explore?
It's interesting that you asked that question because we just last week finished moving all of we've had offsite storage we have a lot of stuff, 26 million or so artifacts. So we've had lots of closets all over the Dearborn area. Last week, we finished moving all of them on site into a new, massive, fantastic storage space. So we've been discovering things that we may not have remembered were in our collections, but also we've been actively collecting during this time period. So we asked people to send us artifacts, send us their stories of what it has been like to live through this pandemic. And so we've been actively collecting there. We've also been actively collecting, because as we all know, social issues have been really at the forefront of so much of our lives in the last year and a half. And so we've collected lots of things about social protest as well.
What a fascinating job you must have. Cynthia Jones with us. She's the general manager for the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. If someone hasn't been there in a few years, because we know a lot of schools will take kids there as part of a field trip when you're young. If you haven't been, and so many families have more time on their hands because they're not traveling or maybe just not doing those work trips that they once did. What will they experience if they come into the Henry Ford right now?
Sure, absolutely. So our main museum is open 7 days a week. Our giant screen theater experience, formerly the IMAX, is open Thursdays through Sundays with great educational films. Greenfield Village is definitely our gem, especially this time of year. It's our outdoor living history museum that is also open right now, Thursday through Sundays. And our Ford Rouge factory tour is open, so you can see F-150 production. So there's a lot of choices. The real key for folks to think about as they plan to come down and visit us, just like the governor is suggesting, we encourage everyone to vaccinate who can, right? So vaccination is our path back for tourism, and we definitely encourage that. Beyond that, we are requiring, since we do have folks who get in somewhat close contact, either with our presentation staff or, with each other, we do encourage you and require you to wear a mask during your visit, unless you're eating or drinking at one of our fabulous restaurants. But really, it feels a lot like the best of your past visits. So if you're in Greenfield Village right now, you're going to see our horse carriages driving around. You're going to be able to buy a ticket and get on the steam locomotive. You can go up to and in many of our buildings. You'll get to interact with staff. Similarly in the museum, you get to do all these things that are wonderful. What's interesting about the indoor museum right now is this is our very lowest visitation. And so folks have tons of room to spread out. I said Monday afternoon, I was in there later in the afternoon. I said, wow, it's almost like you're having a private visit because there's so few indoors right now.
That really is, I mean, what a way to experience it as
Yeah.
well without the crowds. So again, one of the upsides of the
Hmm.
pandemic. My husband went with my niece and nephew to the Marvel exhibit, raved the entire time. Um, I, I know that one that's gone now, right? What's
Yep.
next?
So the Marvel exhibition had moved on. We just completed a display about Tiffany glass, and what we're building right now, which opens June 5th, is Jim Henson Imagination Unlimited. So if you were inspired by Sesame Street, the Muppets, Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, all of those amazing, amazing puppeting experiences, we dig in. It's about 7,000 square foot exhibition. It's going to be fantastic.
So when you're trying to put on one of these exhibits, how do you come up with which ones you want to display? It just seems like so much goes into it.
Yeah, there is a tremendous amount. So we'd like to partner. So this one is an exhibition that has traveled across the country, similarly to Marvel. So we'll partner with folks that we know do really good educational but fun content. I think Henson is a great example because I think if you come, we know a lot of times it's actually the grandparents who bring the youngsters with them, but also families. And to be able to have that multi-generational connection. All of us know who Kermit the Frog is, right? And so all of us have that moment when you come around the corner and you see Kermit, and it's just, oh my gosh. So we look for things that people can share a conversation around, that you can learn, but you can also have a good time, especially for the summer. We know folks, kids who've been learning online all year, who've been working with this, maybe they want to have a little mental break, have a little more fun, have a little more physical opportunities. So we have hands-on puppeting inside the exhibition. So we'll have all the ways you can clean your hands, and we'll be cleaning the puppets and all that. But you'll be able to, if you choose to, find out what it's like to puppet on TV. It's not something I think I'd be good at. I think my face might pop up into the into the camera angles, and but I think some good fun learning. Um, Looking ahead actually to this fall, we're actually doing our own show. So we also produce our own shows. We're looking at new acquisitions because, as I mentioned, we're always adding to our collections. And then looking into next winter, we'll be doing an Apollo show about going to the moon. So it gives us opportunities to really stretch beyond our own great content.
Well, really, the museum is so much about inspiration and innovation. And we've seen that happen throughout the pandemic because for some people, it was a time to escape the rat race of day to day life and to become creative throughout this time.
It absolutely has been. I think, you can tell from my background if you're watching on the television today. I'm actually working from home today, and that is not something that I would have gotten to do pre-pandemic. And so thinking about, the ways that we spend our time more purposefully right now, I think is something we're definitely hearing from our guests. People are making choices about what they support, what they want to keep running. And we definitely, as a nonprofit museum organization, we value that so much. Folks have said, we trust you. We trust you to work with us to be safe, and we're going to help keep you open and keep you moving. And similarly, when I spend my time out there in the community, I'm looking at those organizations I want to support.
Cynthia Jones with us here on the MegaCast. She's the general manager for the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. And, Cynthia, I know it's early in the conversation, but we do know a lot of organizations are talking about requiring possibly a vaccination for some of their guests to attend or to come into events. Do you anticipate that could happen at the museum, or it's just too early to talk about that?
So we follow the CDC guidelines very closely. We obviously are very engaged with Michigan's travel and tourism industry and with the state government officials and economic officials. We're tracking on this. I suspect that we're going to lean into the encouraging you to do it because it truly is the path back to opening all of things that we want to have open, right? All of us want to be able to go to large car shows if that's our thing, or to be able to go to the art festival or the state fair, and I think that we understand that the best way to do that right now is to get vaccinated. We recently did an anonymous poll within our own staff and volunteer corps, and the numbers were incredible. Our folks who have been there, who've been on site, who've been working with the public, they jumped on it. They got those vaccinations. They're protecting themselves and protecting the community that comes to visit us. We hope that guests will do similarly.
With that, Cynthia Jones here with us on the MegaCast from the Henry Ford Museum. With that, can we say we're hearing so much right now about electric vehicles
Yeah.
and autonomous vehicles? How do you think the changing of the automotive industry is going to play into the museum?
Yeah, great question. So at the Ford Rouge factory tour, which is at the Dearborn truck plant, right there with Ford Motor Company, when you look out our observation deck windows right now, you're seeing Ford's electric F-150 facility being built. It's right there on the campus. It's right in front of you. It is going to be part of our mix of things we're talking about. So we're living in this right now every day. And I love that one in particular because it's being built on the grounds of the historic Mustang plant. So thinking about how industry is changing, how we are changing, how what we drive is changing, that's like right there. It's part of our conversation. For the museum, I look at electric vehicles and I look at autonomous driving and I look at all of those things and I think similarly to the pandemic where we leaned into how do we make our resources as accessible for people as we can. So we did all sorts of virtual programs. We're also thinking about how electric vehicles can make travel more accessible for people. So I imagine, aging in the future and thinking about, maybe I don't have to worry about keeping my license. Maybe there's autonomous vehicles that run a loop and take you to amazing cultural attractions around the area, right? Like it's my vision of how do I want to age in place in a really fun, creative way. Similarly, I think about what does the school bus of the future look like? We have no idea, right? Like, is that an autonomous shuttle that picks you up? We recently acquired a test vehicle that University of Michigan had that was an autonomous shuttle on their campus. And we acquired not only the vehicle, we acquired some of their data because they were asking these questions about how do people feel riding these things, right? This is a huge change. And you know, am I comfortable yet with not a person behind a wheel? I'm not sure. Do I predict I might become comfortable? Yeah, I do, because I've lived through a lot of change in my life and I know that this change is coming.
Well, and just think back to the beginning of the automobile. People weren't comfortable then either. We
Oh,
went
yeah.
from, horse and buggies. So
Yeah,
change happens
change
and
happens.
we adapt it. That's the one thing that's constant is
It's
change happens.
absolutely constant. And I also think back to that early age of the automobiles. You know, we didn't even know. So if you look at some of the vehicles in our collection, some of them have steering wheels, some of them don't. They have tillers like a boat, right? Like we didn't know even how we wanted to drive this thing. We didn't know how to power it. So we have vehicles, very, very early vehicles that were powered by steam. We have a 1913 electric vehicle, which is one of my favorites in our collection. So we didn't really know what a vehicle was going to be. And I love to think about how that was such a creative time. And similarly, we're in a super creative time right now about figuring out the best way to give, I like to think about it as democratized mobility. So, how do you give mobility to the most people in the best way for them, for our planet? We're asking these really big questions, and I love that.
And it really is, I think now more so than ever, getting back to innovation and thinking outside of the box.
Yes,
We've all learned one thing in this crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. It's not how things are done. We've had to think outside the box and do things differently, which we know always sparks creativity.
absolutely. And we are involved with Invention Convention, which is this movement with kids across the country and across the world where kids take on these big questions and they invent their solution to it. And, I'll be a judge for Invention Convention over the next couple of weeks, and I can't wait to see what they've proposed, what they've come up with, because they are not tied to what was, they're tied to what can be. And I love to be inspired by that piece and then ask myself, okay, how am I part of what can be?
I love that. Cynthia Jones with us here on the MegaCast. She's a general manager for the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. And just another minute or two, Cynthia. How are you guys looking when it comes to employees? Because so many businesses are struggling right now.
So we're struggling. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of the employees that are with us, to the incredible core of volunteers we have. But that said, for us to expand our operations, to bring back more and more and more, we need to bring back people. And, as I said, we're a nonprofit. We don't pay a lot. We have a phenomenal working environment. We have a great opportunity. And I say that, and it doesn't matter what you do for us. It is a phenomenal place to be working. So we're out there hiring right now. If you're interested in part-time work with us, please apply. I'm hiring presenters. If you love racing and mobility, we just opened Driven to Win, our new racing exhibition. You could work there right in the thick of it. You could work in Henson this summer. So there's lots of good ways to engage with us. We're also looking for volunteers.
Well, and definitely, you're such an important part of our community. Cynthia Jones, General Manager for the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. We so appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
And again, you can always find out more information on their website. When does the Jim Henson exhibit start again,
Jim
June?
Henson opens June 5th and it runs through Labor Day. So you have the summer to come see us. Greenfield Village, come on out now. You can see the baby lambs and then look ahead to June with all that's coming with Motor Muster.
Well, thank you again for being with us.